Hello, you're listening to Roll for Crit Spotlight. I'm Jonathan Estes.
And I'm Will Keeler.
And Spotlight is the series, if you didn't know, in which we invite members of the tabletop gaming world to talk about their experiences and the industry itself. Our guest today is the designer of AEG's upcoming game Tiny Towns, a unique strategy game in which players compete to build the best tiny town that they can. Peter McPherson, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be on.
Thank you. Thank you for coming out. Very excited to talk to you today. Very excited. We've had a chance to kind of check out Tiny Towns at PAX Unplugged last year. So looking forward to talking to you about it, get a little more insight into it. As we said, Tiny Towns, it's your new game. It is scheduled for release this April. But for anyone who might be watching or listening to this who doesn't know, could you just kind of give us a brief pitch for the game? What makes it special? What is it all about?
Sure. So in Tiny Towns, each player is the mayor of their own tiny town, represented by a 4x4 grid. And you're going to be constructing various buildings. There's 7 buildings in each game. And those will change from one game to the next, but you've got 7 buildings you can build by making different resource patterns. So there's 5 resources in the game, and you need to make these sort of Tetris-like patterns by laying 1 resource per square in your grid to match one of the cards, and then you remove the resources and put the building on your board. But you can only have 1 resource or 1 building per space. So as you work on multiple projects at once, things get really cozy. And then as you finish them, you have room to breathe again until eventually your town does fill up with resources. And I think something that makes it different is a mechanic some have called sort of roll and write-esque, which is that you take turns naming a resource when you're master builder. So if you're the master builder, you say yellow, and now everyone has to take a yellow whether they want it or not. So at the end of the game, everyone has dealt with exactly the same set of resources going into their towns. And whichever town is worth the most points at the end is the winner.
It's interesting that you mentioned, bringing it up as roll and write esque, because I think that's definitely something that comes across in the game.
Yes, except there's no rolling and there's no writing, but yes.
Other than those 2 things, it's like the same genre.
Yeah, pretty much.
And another big feature that AEG is actually pushing with this is that it technically can fit an infinite number of players, as long as you have enough copies and someone can actually be the master builder and host. Was this idea to be able to make it, in essence, an infinite cap a part of the initial start of the design? And is this something you're thinking of you'd go forward with other games?
So I don't think I set out to accommodate an infinite number of players specifically. I wanted it to be a high player count game, and the turns are simultaneous. So it may be your turn as master builder, but everyone is placing a cube on their board wherever they want, and then everyone can build on anyone's turn. So as you add players, it's only going to be as slow as the slowest player in the group. So playing with 12 people doesn't necessarily make it longer than a 6-player game. Mm-hmm. And it does play slightly differently when you're playing with more than 6. There's a deck that comes in the box. You can play this with fewer than 6, but we recommend this for bigger groups, that has resource cards. So rather than taking turns as master builder and watching it very slowly make its way around your group of 30 people or however many you're playing with, you can use the resource deck. So you flip 2 cards. Those 2 resources must go in everyone's town, and then you get 1 resource of your choice. Mm. So that's how it accommodates those larger group sizes.
It does have a solo mode as well. Is that right?
Yes, and that also uses the resource deck in a slightly different way.
Okay, so you've run the full gamut, no matter what player count anyone on the planet could possibly need. Yep. They have that going for them, which is pretty exciting and ambitious for first game. And speaking of this being your first game, you're a freelance designer, and this is your first official game release going through AEG, which is a pretty major publisher in the board game industry. What's it like being given such a high profile? The marketing, the kind of the push behind this game that being with a company like AEG gives you?
It's pretty surreal. I'm still in the phases of accepting that my game is going to be a real thing that will be on shelves and people will take home and play. So I've been really lucky to work with AEG. They've treated me really well and just put out the best possible game I think this could be. I mean, I think it looks like the most deluxe version I could have ever imagined. So they've really put a lot of work into making it the best it can be. And I don't know, it's been unreal. It's been really cool seeing so many people playing it out there in the wild and seeing it at so many conventions. I got to show it at PAX Unplugged, which was a lot of fun because I pitched it at PAX Unplugged 2017, and so a year later to have my game have its own booth and everything with I don't know if you saw the tablecloth they had that had the building cards on the tablecloth, was really an awesome experience. So it's been a blast.
So you mentioned you actually just pitched it at the last PAX Unplugged. What was that actually like? Was AEG the first one? They were just like, yes, we'll take it. And obviously, since not many people think about the pitching process, when you do have a game idea and taking it to companies, do you have any advice for anyone else out there with their new games?
So I guess my main advice would be to research each company individually and make sure you follow whatever preferred route they want you to submit games and approach with the pitch. Some companies are okay with you handing them a sell sheet at a convention, and other companies will take your sell sheet and put it in the garbage and then go on to do all of their scheduled meetings with people who went through the correct route. So research each company individually. And then just listen to lots of podcasts about game design and read other people's experiences with pitching. I was devouring Ludology aggressively prior to PAX Unplugged and consider that sort of my education in game design and pitching and the whole thing. So, I pitched to 5 publishers at PAX Unplugged. I mentioned I got lucky before, but I got really lucky because that was my first time pitching. This is the first design that I have really actively tried to get to companies. So I think somehow just the stars aligned. But I also feel like I did my homework going into it, and I felt pretty prepared and wasn't extremely surprised by some of the questions I was asked during pitching. And AEG was the company that was the most excited about the game. I remember showing it to other companies. I had these little wooden meeples that weren't quite as nice as the ones in Tiny Towns. I ordered them from Spiel Material, a German game parts site. They were sort of like Catan-esque in their simplicity, and I thought they were nice and charming. And a lot of publishers saw those and said, this is going to be a very expensive game, and this is going to need to be something else. AEG was my last pitch, so by then I showed them all the custom meeples. It's like a half pound of wood on the table, and said, these meeples could be tiles or cards or something else. They don't have to be wooden buildings. And they immediately said, oh no, we love the custom meeples. The custom meeples are great. And that was before I even began the pitch. So it started off on a good note. And then they were just really excited about it and told me I'd be involved in the whole creative process, or as involved as I wanted to be. And they 100% kept me in the loop the whole way, which was great.
And you got, I believe the final retail price is only $39.99. So apparently they found a way to keep that cost down.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. It is a big box, but I think when you open it, it's pretty filled with stuff. The bottom third of the box is all the wooden pieces. So I'm pretty excited that we hit that price point.
Yeah, I think even if your box is somewhat big, as long as it's using up the space well, I think most people would be fine with that. We've seen some bad offenders who could have used a box half the size. So,
right, yep.
right. Plus, it's kind of it adds to the appeal that it's a big box, but it's called Tiny Towns. It's like an ironic joke.
Oh yeah, we were definitely going for that. Sure.
Yeah, that's good. I'm wondering, how long have you been designing games on your own before you finally felt like this was the one that you wanted to bring around and actually show to people?
So I would say about 5 or 6 years I've been making this. I mean, there was a long period of having game ideas and writing them down and doing nothing. And then probably 5 or 6 years ago, I was like, maybe I should, make prototypes and coerce my friends into playing these games. So like just about everybody, I made several really, really bad games that got played maybe 5 times if those games were lucky. And oftentimes I would start doing my research on Board Game Geek and realized, oh, this game already exists. It's called Talisman or something.
Hey, when that happens.
Yeah. And so Tiny Towns was the first one where after the first play, I was like, okay, this could be really workable. And it was also a lot less sprawling and complicated than other games I'd made before. So I wish I had tried playtesting earlier and gotten to prototyping quicker. There's that saying, fail faster. I think that's really, really true, to get your game to the table as quickly as possible and find out how bad it is as quickly as possible so you can make the changes or move on. But since Tiny Towns, I've been applying that philosophy, and I've got a playtest group now, which is fantastic. So I have a bit more of a process for creating games.
On your Board Game Geek page, you are credited for one other game, which is Temple of Knowledge.
Yes, Temple of Knowledge.
So I don't know if you could tell us a little about that.
Sure. So that one is a co-design with my friend Kevin Root. And we designed that game for an education technology company. And the idea behind that game, it's sort of like Forbidden Island or Forbidden Desert in that co-op vein. And it's a game that you could play with any subject because instead of any random element, it used flashcards. So you would come across a challenge, you would answer a flashcard, it would determine how the game goes. And so this was last summer. I was working for an education company and had pretty much my dream job for a very short window of time, developing games for this company for the classroom. And it was a ton of fun. It was really a tricky constraint to work in because these games had to fit on roughly 1 page of paper with 1 page of rules, and they had to work for all subjects.
That's a lot.
But we had a blast with Temple of Knowledge, bringing it to classrooms and showing it to students. But I do consider Tiny Towns my first published game. But yes, there is that BGG page for Temple of Knowledge still out there in the wild.
Yeah, I mean, you can see. Yeah, I think you can find it still as a print and play. And it looked, honestly, as I think that the term educational game probably leaves a bad image in a lot of people's heads when they hear that, at least hardcore board game players. But I thought that it looked fun. And in addition to doing game design, I know you also write, you blog, you do book reviews. It seems like in general, education, knowledge, the pursuit of learning is a passion of yours. Is that something that you think that you apply to your game designs outside of educational games, or something that you would want to bring more to the forefront in future designs?
I wouldn't say it's necessarily a personal philosophy of mine. Of course, I like education, but I don't have an education degree. I have an English degree, which I'm sure is surprising given my brief bio there. But I mean, I do think games have a ton of applications in the classroom, and we got to see firsthand how excited not only the students were to be playing this game, but also the teachers were like, "Oh my gosh, you don't realize how engaged these kids are. Like this doesn't usually happen." So that was a really cool thing to hear. Whether Tiny Towns is educational, I think it's educational in a spatial reasoning and risk reward sort of way, but I can't say I put any specific tenets of education into that game.
You are working on an expansion for Tiny Towns and hopefully some other things as well. Can you talk about any about that, and if it maybe will somehow reach back around to maybe looking back at educational games or whatnot?
So I haven't been told I can't talk about it, so I will.
Right.
So the first Tiny Towns expansion is, it's not yet named and it's not yet certain or anything like that, but I am co-designing it with Josh Wood, who was the developer for Tiny Towns. He's also the designer of Cat Lady. And so the first expansion introduces a currency to the game that essentially gives players an optional challenge and takes a little bit of the edge off of the game. You guys said you saw it at PAX Unplugged. Did you get an opportunity to play it?
We didn't get to actually play a full game, but we kind of got a brief demo of it.
Okay, so you can imagine how every once in a while someone says a resource that you just really do not want to put in your town and don't know what to do with.
Yep.
Yeah, from time to time that happens. So with this currency, the currency is worth 1 point. And you earn it by constructing 2 buildings at once. So if you make 2 buildings at the same time, you get one of these currencies, which we haven't decided exactly what it's going to be yet. And that is worth 1 point, but you can also spend it on a future turn when someone names a resource that you don't want. And you can change that resource into something else. So someone says yellow, and you can't bear the idea of a yellow so much so that you're willing to pay 1 whole point to change it into a red or something else. So it gives everybody a little bit of a buffer between the resources flowing into their town and being named by other players. And of course that will work with the Master Builder version and with the Town Hall mode, which is played with the resource deck. And I was supposed to segue this back to educational games, but
well, I mean, just other games and other maybe out. If you weren't doing just Tiny Towns, do you have any other projects you're working on? that you can talk about, or have said that you haven't said that you can't talk about?
I don't have anything. I don't have any other games signed at the moment or anything that's, in talks with other publishers. But Tiny Towns really is my main focus right now because we want to develop these expansions concurrently so they fit together nicely. We are working on expansions beyond the first one, and whether all those happen will depend on how the game is received. But as for personal designs, I have other personal designs. I have a drawing game called Artistes that I've been working on for a while, which is a party drawing game that does not necessarily encourage good drawings. In fact, it really specifically punishes drawing too well. It uses what you could call a Dixit-like scoring. Everyone is drawing things at the same time. They reveal their drawings, and then they take on the role of critics, trying to guess who drew what. But as the artist, you only score points if some but not all players guess your drawing correctly. And you score a ton of points if you can get exactly one person to guess your drawing correctly. And all the words in the game are really basic nouns like cat. So you have to represent a cat in some abstract way that only one of the 7 other players is going to get. And then when you're the critic, you don't really care about being right. You only want to guess what the most popular response was. So you're just thinking about what other people's interpretation will be of the drawings as you guess them.
Well, considering some of the drawing games we've played, that would be interesting. If I recall a past experience of someone trying to draw a donkey, Jonathan, if you recall.
I don't recall. You're going to have to remind me.
Someone got donkey and they tried to draw it like Shrek or something, but no one knew where they were coming from with that.
Oh yeah, that's starting to ring a bell. Yeah, no, we're that sounds right up our alley. We love creative kinds of drawings, games that aren't just Pictionary, that make you have to tailor it a little bit in a different direction.
Right.
That sounds very cool.
Do you think you would shop this around again with or would you actually try to open your own little publishing after with the success of Tiny Towns?
Oh, I don't think I will be opening my own publishing company. I want to sit at home and design games and find other people who want to take all the financial risks and worry about distribution and production and all of that.
So I guess you never considered going the Kickstarter route.
No, and I looked into it briefly and thought that sounds really scary and like it takes a lot of work, and it does, and I think it is the right route for some people, but I just don't think I have the business mind for that. I'd love to be involved with publishing companies in different capacities in the future, but I mostly just want to make my own games from home and get other people excited about them. And I do really enjoy the pitching process. I think it's a lot of fun to create a game and think about, where does this fit in? What gap is this filling out there? Which is hard when there's 3,000 new games per year. But but I hope the games I make will fill some gap out there somewhere for someone.
It's hard enough for us to cover them all. I can't imagine what it's like to try to design a brand new one that's going to stand out from the crowd. You've been to a number of conventions showing off Tiny Towns. What's that experience been like, demoing the game and seeing new people play it for the first time and give you feedback, presumably? Has it been mostly a positive experience? It's
been overwhelmingly positive. It's really fun. I mean, I enjoy teaching anyone my game and watching them get it. I'm lucky enough to have a really simple game that I can teach in like 3 minutes, and then usually once it's going, there aren't any questions. So I just get to sit there and watch and sort of make notes of different decisions. So it is a lot of fun to get feedback in person and to watch people realize things like, oh no, I shouldn't have created that pocket there in the corner because now nothing can ever be built there. And have little realizations like that as they play. So it's really fun. It's just exciting to know that other people are playing my game, and so to sit there and watch someone play it and watch them smile as they do something clever or as they realize they made a terrible mistake is a really cool, rewarding experience. And I hope I get to do that a lot more soon.
Has anyone ever actually broken your game and did something you didn't realize was possible and just were like, uh-oh?
Since everything's been finalized, no. I would say the closest to that, it's an example that's a little too esoteric for me to explain, but the developer has pulled some shenanigans where we're like, whoa, I didn't realize that was possible, but that's really hard to do, so that's totally fine with me. But during playtesting, absolutely people would break stuff, especially the monuments, which are these are personal buildings that you're given. So you've got your own building card, only you can build it, and it gives you a new way to play or a new way to score. Those have to be balanced a lot more carefully because everyone doesn't have access to them. And there were some that were very exploitable early on. So we fixed it, so now they're only slightly exploitable.
That's a challenge out there for everyone who's going to get tiny towns, to try to find the best way to exploit the game mechanics. Do things.
Oh boy, looking forward to that.
You're not supposed to do. I do want to touch on one last aspect of the game that I think is really interesting and seems to keep popping up in our personal discussions and on our different shows, is the idea that at the end of Tiny Towns, whether you're the winner or the loser, you have this nice little town that you can look at and enjoy and kind of feel good about either way. That's something that we've come to really appreciate in a lot of games. Where does that come from? Is that something that you really were hoping to do, or was that just kind of a happy accident?
That was a deliberate design decision, just because those are the games that I personally enjoy. I love stuff like Castles of Burgundy, where you create this, this sprawling little kingdom or whatever it is, province you're making in Castles of Burgundy. And exactly like you said, I love a game where at the end, whether you did well or whether you did poorly, you did something cool and you did something that was yours. So I wanted to make a game where you really had ownership over what you were creating. And so, yes, I do hope people feel that way in Tiny Towns. It's possible to do so really not well, that your town might be a little bit empty if it gets plugged up with resources, but most of the time people are able to fill their board with a few things and complete some personal goals they set and look at their happy little tiny town.
Yeah, we keep trying to come up with a name for that, but we haven't landed on anything yet.
Yeah, I'll think on that, because it's definitely a genre, and it's easy to say when a game falls into that. Like, in my opinion, a deck builder isn't quite that. Like, you are making something and it is yours, but you can't really admire it at the end unless
you don't see it.
Yeah. It's not visible unless you count sorting your cards at the end of Dominion, a form of that, but that doesn't quite.
Yeah, like for me, I wouldn't throw deck builder because you only see it when you do that turn when you do a crazy combo. It's not really like end of the game, here's my masterpiece kind of deal.
Right. Yeah.
Like with a roll and write, when you actually can see, oh, this is the little town I built, or this is where I drew. It's something. It's there.
Yeah, and roll and writes are interesting because you can quite literally have ownership over what you created. If you're playing a game with tear off sheets of paper, you could put it up on your fridge if you were proud enough of it. So I think the roll and write genre has gained popularity in part because of that ownership.
Roll and write definitely seems to be one of the big new genres, new mechanics that are becoming popular.
It's the game of 2019.
Yeah. Do you think? I mean, we've seen some spin-offs before. Would it be redundant, or is there a chance maybe a Tiny Towns roll and write version could be a thing in the future?
I've thought about it, and the tricky puzzle with that is that in Tiny Towns you're putting resources down and then you remove them. So it wouldn't be a one-to-one adaptation. I don't think I could create the same exact experience. But something similar that still lets you fill a 4x4 grid with buildings, quite possibly. I mean, it's mechanically similar-ish enough. Maybe players are even naming resources that go on each other's roll and write tiny towns. But yeah, it's possible. It's something I've thought about.
All right. So we always end our Spotlight episodes with the same two final questions. It's kind of our lightning round, although you can actually take as much time as you want. We just call it that because it's catchy. So the first one of those is there a current trend in the tabletop games industry that you're particularly excited about? Could be roll and write, could be something different, or is there maybe even one that you're potentially worried about?
I would say, well, I'd like to talk about roll and writes just because I think it's a really interesting thing going on. I don't think roll and writes are a trend that's going to come and go away. I think there's just something inherently charming about them, especially in my opinion, ones that use pencil and paper. And I've played a decent amount of roll and writes, and I feel like there is more to be explored. Not that the ones I've played haven't been clever. I just think there's so much you can do with having players draw different symbols or maybe a way roll and write boards can be sort of modular in a way. I absolutely think that genre is going to stick around for a long time. Maybe this will be an initial burst of popularity that fades, but I bet there will be future waves of roll and writes, because I just think there is so much you can do with that. And then I also think we've been seeing lots of games sort of as objects lately, just games where it's more than something flat on the table, stuff like Azul, where you've got like the chunky tiles, or Gizmos, where you have the marble dispensing thing that you think is going to be a gimmick, and then you play with it and you're like, oh man, if that weren't there, this game would be so much harder it would be so much more frustrating. It's really an integral part of the experience. And I think it's cool when someone sees a game on a table and sees some shiny object in the middle that really stands out and makes it sort of toy-like. And I think that's absolutely an awesome trend, a really nice change.
We've noticed that with a bunch of games too, and it's a great thing as well, because first of all, if you're playing it anywhere, someone sees it, they're like, what is that?
Right.
We can do some really creative stuff with a 3D board or figures and stuff.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Fireball Island is like another example that comes to mind, or Forbidden Sky. I think we also felt like, yeah, components are fun. Tiny Towns too, I think, that kind of does the same thing with something that you kind of feel like you are playing with it literally, and that it's a game, but you also feel like you're playing with it in a more toy-like sense.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and final question. Can you recommend a game that you're playing right now, or just one game that you think that more people should be playing?
One that I cannot stop playing lately is Flamme Rouge. I got this game about 1.5 years ago, and Flamme Rouge is designed by Oscar Harding Granerud. I'm not positive of the pronunciation of his name. But have you guys played Flamme Rouge?
I don't think we have.
Yeah, no.
This is one that we've missed.
So it's a bike racing game, and it takes from 2 to 4 players, and with the expansion, it goes from the Peloton expansion, it goes from 2 to 12. And at 12 players or at 6 players, and it's just such a crazy, chaotic time. It's sort of like a deck builder, except your deck only gets worse, and turns are simultaneous, so it's really fast, and it captures the feeling of a race so well. I wouldn't say it's really like an under the radar game. Like it's up there on the BGG, top list. But I don't hear it talked about, or I don't see it played as much as I feel like it deserves to be played. Every single time I play it, something funny happens that I'd never seen before, or I see a new strategy. And the rules of the game are so simple. There's just barely anything to it. You play a card, you move your biker that many numbers, you discard that card from your deck, and everyone's decks are just getting worse and worse. And at the end, you're wondering who has enough energy left to pass the finish line. So I think it's such, Yep, it's super clever, and you've got like slipstreaming between bikers, and it's fun because you don't want to be winning. You really, really don't want to be winning in the middle of the race or the beginning of the race, because if you're at the front, you're getting exhaustion cards that go into your deck that are not good. And then the worst thing that can happen is you fall behind the pack, because then you're getting exhaustion cards and you're not even winning. And you just want to catch up to the pack and start slipstreaming again and getting rid of those exhaustion cards. So I think it's a really elegant design, and also a game with major table presence, and it's got that toy aspect to it with all these little plastic bikers. And just seeing 12 little plastic bikers, careening around your table is a really cool sight.
The deck idea sounds really cool, because usually you're working on making your deck better, not worse. Just thematically makes perfect sense, because, if you're doing a race, usually you're tired by the end of it. You're not stronger.
Right. And if you've played carefully, you're basically just working to worsen your deck at a slower rate than the competition, essentially, which is so inherently funny.
Definitely check that one out. We definitely will. Flamme Rouge. Tiny Towns is going to be released in April. Is there an exact date that you guys have?
So April 26th is the brick and mortar release date, when it's going to be at friendly local game stores. And then May 10th is the online release date.
Got it. Okay, so definitely be on the lookout for that. But aside from Tiny Towns, is there anywhere else that people can follow you online to figure out all the latest happenings, all the new stuff you have coming out?
Yes, you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Peter L. McPherson. And that's where I post my pictures of prototypes and pictures of other people's games and just random games I'm playing most of the time.
Sounds good.
Yeah, it's always fun to follow, and when you get to see a game in the early development stages, and you almost feel like you can follow it. And when it comes out, it's like you had a little part of helping, even if I didn't at all. It's really all you.
Yep. I know what you mean.
Where's my name on the box?
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today on the show. If again, everybody out there, definitely follow Peter online and definitely check out Tiny Towns. I think that it seems like AEG is putting a lot of support behind it, and I think for good reason. They believe in the game. I think it's a really strong first title, ignoring any other smaller titles that may be on your Board Game Geek page. And I think it's really exciting. So everybody should check that out. And thanks again. And I'm Jonathan Estes.
And I'm Will Keeler.
And this, you can say it. Go ahead.
All right. And this has been Roll for Crit Spotlight.
Hey, if you liked this video, then like this video and subscribe to our channel for more board game content.
Would you kindly do it now?